Felt really judgmental. That was the first time anyone's asked me to write my own bio, which felt really weird to do, but I didn't want to undersell it. And as I was writing that out, I was like, oh, how do I not inflate who I am here? But I do have too many pets, so that's actually how I feel. There are way too many animals at my house, which is because I live in Snohomish. And there's so many animals up there for free and around. And my children found them and they wanted them. And it was COVID, so I said yes. Oh, we started COVID. Okay, well, here we go. Talk about some of the least restful parts of my life. We started COVID with 0 pets. We now have 1 dog, 2 cats. We have 6 bunnies, which is down from 12 in the last month, okay? That story is hilarious. And then we also have 4 chickens. And because of the chickens, we now have a collection of rats in our backyard, which is why I'm trying to rehome the chickens right now. Anyway, animals isn't like a major storyline. I am shocked at how much I love animals now, because I always was a person that kind of made fun of people who acted like their dogs were a family member. I remember actively saying that, and even my teens, like, oh my gosh, people and their dogs. And now I'm obsessed with my dog, and absolutely think he's a family member. So COVID taught me how much I could love animals, and how many I could say yes to in a single year. Well, hey, I'm here to talk about rest today. I love this subject. It's kind of a funny subject to talk about. Like, I wish I could just bring you through an experience of rest. Coming here, like I wish you could come and we'd be like, someone asked me today, like, what if you just took a big nap, like a group nap? Which I think that would actually be terrifying. But I wish I could take you through something that would actually give direct rest. I wish I could just Oprah it. I wish I could be like, and if you look under your chair, there's 2 tickets to Cabo for 5 days at an all-inclusive resort. I can't bring you through an experience of rest, but I do think rest is something that's so individual. Like, you have to do quite a bit of wrestling with rest yourself, and it's this subject that has so many tributaries. There's so many layers to rest. I'm a person who did not value rest. Like maybe many of you, when I ended up in my 20s, I pretty much erased rest from my life because it was the time to go after my career. It was the time to establish some worth that I felt in my life. So I really erased rest, deprioritized it through my 20s and into my early 30s. And then I felt the cost of it deeply and had to go through a movement towards rest. And now I don't see it as optional. I don't see this subject as niche. I don't see it as extra. I see it as absolutely essential. And there's a wrestling with all of us individually at a soul level when we talk about do you rest or do you not, and what it is that keeps you from rest, and your sense of life, right? There's so many implications to this. It's very layered, this discussion. So I'll touch on some of these, and they'll probably push on some areas inside you, and that's kind of the hope. But I also think as I talk, if you have a pen, great. If you have a notes app, great. Because I will ask you some questions that'll probably be ones that no one can answer except for you in your own life. These are some of the layers, just as if I'm even going to just talk about some of them. First is just structural implications of rest, which is, does your life actually allow for rest? With your current responsibilities and rhythms, you don't have to answer this. This is rhetorical at this point. Do you have meaningful moments, activities, relationships that you walk away from and you feel, hey, wow, I feel rested now as a result? Or are you living a life of rushing, of overcommitment, constantly moving, constantly stimulated, constantly scrolling, et cetera, et cetera? That's just the structural stuff. Are you structurally set up for success? But then there's also some really big spiritual implications to rest too. Do you even have a theology of rest? Do you believe that it's a part of your humanity, deep down, something you were created for? When you think about God and what he wants for you, I love this one. There could be a lot of honesty here. Does it make you relax? Do you rest when you think about him? Or does it make you tense or afraid or guilty? Does who he is and what he's done give you a deep sense of security, or does it make you try harder? Feeling guilty, feeling not good enough to be called his child. All of that's related to rest, right? And then there's really emotional implications too, which is perfect because I'm a counselor and I care too much about that stuff. Rest or lack of rest, it's just highly connected to how do you feel? How do you feel in life? How do you feel tonight, walking in, being in this space? Everybody's here carrying even just the last 12 hours and what happened. But are you aware of how you feel? How are you? Do you ask that question, how am I? Because one of the reasons we don't rest or slow is because if you slow down, our self catches up. This is also why we're afraid of quiet, is because one of the things I know about myself and I know about somebody else, we avoid having to feel our feelings. We avoid having to think about our past. We avoid having to deal with if there is a sense of dissatisfaction, insecurity, upsetness. When we stop, that's when we actually have to deal with it. So there's a lot of emotional implications to this. So tonight we're asked, help you pause where you're at. I kind of started it, but I want to finish it. Where you're at, can we just close our eyes here for a moment and maybe just take a deep breath and relax your shoulders, put your feet on the floor. Just come to a sense of being aware of and noticing where am I tonight? What am I feeling? What are you feeling in your body? Just notice that. You don't have to judge it. Doesn't have to be something that you make meaning of, but just notice it. Just want to come to some awareness and acceptance of what am I feeling? What am I carrying? What anxieties or burdens or people or situations do you know are just with you as you enter this space? Let's just acknowledge that for a moment. Take a couple deep breaths. Yeah, that's all I'm going to do there. You can open our eyes. That's all I want to do a little bit. Just bring you to this moment. Okay. Well, I want to begin with the structural implications, okay, which is just, is your life set up for success with rest? We're all pretty bad at rest. in our current setup, in our current society, and just as humans, I do not think it's natural. I think we long for it, and I think in many ways we resist it heavily. So did anybody here read the book by John Mark Comer, Ruthless Elimination of Hurry? Okay, a lot of us. This is, in a lot of ways, that book was almost like an anthem. And I think it's a brilliant book. I really love John Mark Comer, especially for his work in the practices. But that book resonated on a level that was huge. And I think it's because the first 4 chapters are just like, are you feeling this? As he describes a really unpleasant reality of people today, and that's that we're moving way too fast, and it's warping our souls. That everyone's longing for rest, but we're really set up for failure in the way that our culture, our Western culture, and our humanity, our choices, our daily choices. So the premise of that book was just, we're too busy. The pressure, information, opportunities, we can't manage them. They're greater than they've ever been, and it leads to people who are overcommitted and emotionally unwell. That was kind of the premise of his book. What he says is everyone has anxiety. Yes, it's personal, but it's also structural. So a lot of his book is asking, do you even have room for God? And do you even have room to rest? Do you even have room to take a breath? Do you even have room do you even have sleep in your life, right? A lot of structural questions. It's very hard to be a person of rest here today at this time. It's no mystery. He has a long discussion about this. If you read it, maybe you haven't, but just our world has sped up in huge ways that were kind of out of natural sync with the humanity, that the rhythms that were built even into our bodies. So a good example of that is the light bulb. We couldn't do this, or this. It's actually dark enough that it feels like maybe it's candlelit in here. I'm like, how entertaining do I have to be to keep people awake in lighting that's this dark? Well, we didn't used to invade the night the way that we do now, and so even that's affected the way that we sleep. And so just 100 years ago, we used to, the average human in the Western world got like 11 hours of sleep, naturally. Because when the sun, and some of you felt this. If anyone in the windpocalypse, some people, every time I'm out of electricity for a couple days, I have the most incredible sleep life because there's nothing to do, right? Like, I don't want to use my phone because it's going to run out of batteries. And we all go to bed at such an early hour, especially in the winter. So yeah, like people used to get so much sleep, and now the average rest that someone gets is less than 7 hours of sleep. It's the average rest that an adult gets in the U.S. So, and he has, John will talk about this whole thing where we should have so much more time because we have all these devices that save us time. Even here during the winter, we were that whole discussion on your temperature at night. I love to turn up the temperature when it's cold, and it's just so easy. I have one of those fireplaces where you just turn the light on and the fire comes on, but there used to be 11 steps to do that if you wanted a fire, and you wouldn't really be warm, right? You'd just be next to the fire, right? But you'd have to go outside, chop down the tree, bring the wood in, you'd have to kindle, you'd have to keep it lit, and now we're just like flick. So we got all this time back. It's true of our cars, it's true of our washing machines, it's true of even the way we do letters. We don't handwrite anymore. Google tells me what to write, and I click on the script, but I've probably done that to some of you, right? It perceives what I'm gonna. So it's given us so much time back, these labor-saving devices. And so he asked this rhetorical question of where did all that time go? We should have so much. And yet the experience of time by most people today is, I have no time at all. And his conclusion is, where did the time go? Well, we spent it on other things. Because there's something about our humanity that does that. We just constantly fill it with other things. So we don't feel, it's really interesting. I heard this week. There's a sociological group in the UK. It's actually a whole institute around work. And they were asking this question is, are we busier than people were 200 years ago? Are we busier? Historically, are we busier than people 500 years ago? And their conclusion was, we're not busier at all, but our impression of our lives, our experience of it, is that we experience ourselves as way more busy than even they experience themselves. So I thought that was fascinating. I'm curious, you guys have ideas about why that is? Why do you think we feel busier than they felt? You can tell me. Okay, more things. We're involved in more things. We're spending it on more things. Okay. Okay, comparison. Say more. Oh, it's good. Okay. That's a really good way of putting it. The amount of good things you can't do because you are limited. Okay. Mm. Mm. Yes. Great point. Yes. Mm. Yeah, I think we just have access to so much endless amounts of information right here in our pocket. That's overwhelming to me at all times. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of, I don't really know. I can be like, yep. That was the question they posed at the end of their study. But I think all those reasons are probably true. That there is something unique about what you face, the stimulation you have to deal with in your face all the time. I think about advertising. How powerful is advertising constantly? And their job is to make you feel restless. I have an active hate towards advertising. I mean it. I watch my TV on mute a lot, and it annoys my family to no end. Because even if there's a football game, I love football games because I don't have to have any of the volume. I can just sit there and it's quiet, but my brothers hate me for it. Why aren't we listening to this? Because when the commercials come on, they're twice as loud, and it just feels like someone burst. It feels like a YouTube ad every time, on a YouTube ad where it just explodes into the screen. So I can't stand it, but that's what it is. You're being assaulted all the time with the things you don't, a sense of restlessness that they're trying to create in you. So I think all these things are really unique to us. And also just work. He'll go, that's one of the things that's unique about us too, is we actually do work more. We work more than people did. In the US, the average worker in the US works 137 hours more than Japan, 260 hours more than Britain, 499 hours more than France, right? I want to go to France. And we have more than we ever have had before. Conservative estimates show we spend around 3 times more than the average person or household did in 1945, discretionary income, even when that's scaled to our historic moment. The average home in America has over 300,000 items in it. As average, and despite that, happiness levels essentially, sociologists say that they hit a peak around 1950, and they've been kind of in a steady decline ever since then. So the conclusion is we do more, we have more, and we're happier than ever. So that's the setup. That's the world that you walk into every day. That's competing with your rest. Wayne Mueller wrote this wonderful book on Sabbath, and this is what he said about what it takes. He said, having a successful life has become a really violent enterprise, even in our society. And what it takes to be successful will require violence if you're going to do it the way it's being prescribed. He said, we make war on our own bodies, pushing them beyond our limits, war on our own children because we can't find enough time to be with them when they're hurt and afraid and need our company, war on our spirit because we're too preoccupied to listen to the quiet voices that seek to nourish and refresh us, war in our communities because we're fearfully protecting what we have and do not feel safe enough to be kind and generous. War on the earth because we can't take the time to place our feet on the ground and allow it to feed us and taste its blessings and give thanks. It's an incredible quote. But it takes an act of violence for you to be a fit, successful, organized person who's seen as maybe someone who is successful in our society. So there's so much we could say here. I'm not even talking about the phone. Can we all agree we're addicted to our phones? And I don't even fight that anymore. I'm like, oh, absolutely. I mean, when you look at the definition of addiction and what the average human brain does with a phone, it's like, yeah, we're all addicted to it. That was the purpose of its creation. That's what social media is. It's dopamine drops all the time, exploiting a psychological vulnerability that makes you feel like you need it even more. So I think even just how to be a Christian with a phone is such a fascinating thing. My wife tried to turn me onto this thing this week. She said, you need to get online and look at Wise Phone. Has anybody heard of Wise Phone? I mean, I don't know. It's just a brand. It's not like a big revolution. But I went and looked at Wise Phone, and all it is like a $500 phone that's like texting, music, directions. It's like 4 things, right? But it's just as expensive as an iPhone or more. And so at first I was like, this is ridiculous, okay? You can't charge that for a phone that does, 1/100th of what my phone does. But then I was like, but I kind of want that, and I think I would spend a lot of money on that. And so I just thought that was hilarious, that this reverse thing got my wife that was like, it's a phone, but less. And she was like, oh, I'll pay more for that. I thought that was great. But that's where we're at, that now even there's these devices that are like, it will stop the stimulation, and that's a good sell. That's a good sell for us. So I'm just saying all this to say it's a really tough world to live in and have rest. It's a really tough place to live in and have rest. There's emotional implications to this too, okay? So which is just like, what is this doing to us? And I think you guys know this, but anxiety levels, depression levels, really through the roof. I have so much job security because of how much human suffering is out there right now. It's just true, like COVID happened and some enterprises like shut down, and like being a counselor was great because everyone was in a horrible state emotionally. And so, but right now, I mean, anxiety levels are just through the roof, right? And Gen Z, which I think is 26-year-old, right, 20 to 26-year-olds, I think you guys still fit in Gen Z. Just the levels are through the roof. It's not just them, but depression and anxiety are really seen as an epidemic at this point, even post-COVID, not related to what happened there. I'm curious for you guys. Like, there's just so much messaging that leads to anxiety. What are things that are constantly in front of you? What are some things happening in our world which give you constant cultural messaging which might cause you anxiety? Give me some of them. Yep. Is this just what cultural topics or areas of life do you constantly get messages about which cause you to feel anxiety or could cause you to feel anxiety? The news. Yes. Thank you. How about politics? Yeah? I'm like avoiding my feed right now. Absolutely avoiding all the feeds right now. Messaging is really loud. Yeah, what else? What events are happening, right? You guys have access to all that information, all the events that are happening in this world. What things are in front of you that could cause you to feel heaviness or anxiety or worry? Environmental stuff, absolutely. Your future, yes, thank you. Social media, yeah. Israel. Yeah, that whole situation, my goodness. The what?
Just the entire world's supply of bad news.
Yeah.
Access to bad news from across the globe, and it can stop.
Yes. Yeah. It's 24-hour cycle. 24-hour cycle. There's so much, and yeah, I think what's really interesting too, if you know how even social media and the news cycle works, it's meant to provoke an emotional reaction in you. That's what it's designed for. It's trying to get you to react. And so it's interesting to me that the goal is anxiety. It's like, it's working. That's what they're trying to go after, even inside you as you are scrolling. I don't want to cover too much of this because I don't think I have to convince you that this world is bad, but I do want to convince you that you have anxiety. So I really, some of you are like, don't need to be convinced. Yeah, live in that reality every day. But I just want to convey, I just want to show like the emotional state that gets in the way of rest. I really like this list. This is from that book, actually. It's John Mark Comer's 10 symptoms of hurry sickness. Now, hurry sickness is a new term, but essentially just means that you're moving through life way too fast and that your experience of life results in pretty awful emotional realities if that's the case. If structurally your life is not set up with rest, here's kind of the emotional outcome. So let's go through these and you can just score yourself. All right, there's 10 of them. Let's see how your experience lines up with this awful list, okay? And so much compassion. I've got most of these, okay? Number one is irritability, okay? You get mad, frustrated, or just annoyed too easily. Little things irk you. People have to tiptoe around your low-grade negativity, if not anger. For this, you don't want to ask a colleague or a neighbor. You got to ask the people you live with, all right? The people who are really close to you. Number two, hypersensitivity. All it might take is a minor comment to hurt your feelings, a grumpy email to set you off, or a little turn of events that lead to a big emotional reaction for you. Depending on your personality, this could show up as nitpickiness, or anxiety, or depression, or just tiredness. The point is the ordinary problems of life have a disproportionate effect on you. Three is restlessness, and I think we all can relate to this one. When you actually slow down and rest, you can't relax. You give Sabbath a try, you hate it. You read scripture, you find it super boring. No judgment. You have a quiet time with God, but you cannot focus your mind. You go to bed early, you toss with anxiety. You watch TV, you check your phone, you fold laundry, but you answer your email at the same time. Restlessness. Number four is workaholism, or just nonstop activity. You don't know when to stop, or worse, you cannot stop, and your drugs of choice are accomplishment and accumulation. Which could show up as careerism or just like cleaning the house obsessively. Number five is emotional numbness, which is you don't have the capacity to feel someone else's pain or your own pain for that matter. Empathy is just a rare feeling for you because you do not have the time for it. Number six is out-of-order priorities. You feel disconnected from your identity, from your calling. You're always getting sucked into the tyranny of the urgent, but not the important. You feel like your life is reactive. It's not proactive. Seven, lack of care for your body, okay? You don't have time to do the basics, right? 8 hours of sleep, daily exercise, healthy home-cooked food, minimal stimulants. You gain weight, get sick many times a year, regularly wake up exhausted, you don't sleep well. You live off the 4 horsemen of the industrialized food apocalypse: caffeine, sugar, processed carbs, and alcohol. No judgment. Number 8, escapist behaviors. When we're too tired to do what's actually life-giving, we just turn to our distraction of choice, which is true for everyone, okay? Overeating or over-drinking or binge-watching shows or browsing social media or surfing the wells. You kind of find yourself in this negative feedback loop of socially acceptable behaviors. Addictions. Number 9 is slippage of spiritual disciplines. No shame here, but if you're anything like me, these things, when you get over busy, aren't the go-tos. They're actually the first things to go. They're the first thing that get subtracted from our lives. And instead, we end up settling on things like Netflix or binge-watching shows, the same things we just said. He has a good quote here. Comer says, "Instead of life with God, we settle with a life of Netflix or a cheap glass of red wine, a very poor substitute, not because time wasted on entertainment is the great Satan, but because we rarely get done binge watching anything or go to social media, overeating, whatever, and feel awake and alive from the soul outward, rested, refreshed, and ready for a new day." I think that's true. And then 10 is just isolation. You feel really isolated from yourself, from God, from others. Same with your friends, that you feel far from them. So that's just his list. Okay, but how did you score? Did you go 5, 3, maybe you got 2, maybe you got 10? All right, no judgment. What I'm trying to show you is this is the emotional cost of living at a life that's too fast, of living a life without rest. This is what so many people feel. This list resonated with so many people when this book was released. Pete Zero says it this way: you cannot live at warp speed without warping your soul. You just can't do it. When I read this list, the word deprivation comes to mind. I like to talk with Christians about, and just people, about deprivation, because deprivation is ignoring or refusing to meet your own needs, to meet your human needs, to meet your spiritual needs, to meet your physical needs. And my experience with people is that they often don't realize or even have any attunement to the things that we really do need, or we're pushing them away. Sometimes deprivation is even seen as a good thing. That, oh, like, you just keep going. Or, oh, you're really serving other people. But often what's behind deprivation is this real sense of obligation. There's often a story with deprivation. To acknowledge your needs would mean, okay, if you're someone that deprives yourself of these, it's likely you have a story. To acknowledge your needs would mean that you had parents who didn't infantilize you or enmesh with you, but treated you as a separate human, cared about your human needs. So these are some things that I even see as a counselor. It could be that you had parents who were so preoccupied with their own needs, they could not help meet your needs. And that's called neglect. A lot of people have experienced neglect. People who have experienced neglect have a really hard time even seeing their own needs because they weren't being met when they were young. It could be you actually became the person who had to make your mom feel better or had to make your parents feel better. Their needs were what you were meeting, which happens a lot to kids, to make them feel okay. And because of this, in these situations, often parents can't handle their kids' negative emotions. If you had parents that maybe, and I'm not trying to blast your parents here, I think these are just human ways that we become these adults who have these experiences. Or it could be that you don't know how to separate yourself from another person in a relationship or acknowledge their needs as different than your own. That's called codependence, okay? So much of the work even there is helping someone see, like everyone in this room, have individual needs that need to be met, and no one else can meet them. You will have to find ways to meet them with yourself and God. And if you depend on someone else to do that, right, that's when you're going to experience, a whole lot of pain, a whole lot of difficulty, because no one else can. No one else can. Those needs, I have a list of those needs here. These are just some examples of those needs. Okay, physical needs like hunger, thirst, exercise, rest, sleep, a dentist. Emotional needs, right? Validation, love, creative expression, emotional expression. Just even grieving, that's a need, the need to feel negative emotions. Your social needs, just human contact, community, friendship, being known. Spiritual needs, solitude with God, reading scripture. One thing Jay Stringer will say is ignoring your needs is not virtuous, it's dangerously irresponsible. Your spouse, parents, and friends are not responsible for meeting these needs. You are. You are. So if any of those stories are you, by the way, that doesn't make you broken. I think one of the things I'm just constantly trying to tell people, I think I used to believe like, oh, there's wounded people out there, and now I'm like, oh, everyone's wounded. Everyone has wounds. So you're not broken because we all came from imperfect parents. We all enter into relationships with patterns and things we gained that are actually just really broken. It's going to happen. But that's a part of like you as an adult, seeking wholeness for those things, seeking healing for those things. It is essential. So the reason I'm saying this is like if you're going to rest, you're probably going to have to come to terms with a little bit of what do I need, or what have I needed that I've not had. You have to have a sense of self, and because of that, you might have to stop and look inward. And I do think that that's really hard for people. That's required to have a soul that's rested. And honestly, if you're deprived, you're probably struggling, because if you deprive yourself of self-care, of sleep, of relationships, of exercise, of the presence of God, it's likely that your exhaustion and your resignation, okay, which is when you do things you don't want to, or when you give up on the things that matter most, those are huge patterns for anyone who involves himself in deprivation. So I'm in counseling groups with a lot of different struggles, with trauma, with women. I do betrayed groups with women who have been betrayed by partners. I do groups with men who are just trying to understand themselves sexually or specifically problematic sexual behavior. Deprivation is often a huge part of human struggles, because if you deprive yourself of your needs, you're going to engage in exhaustion, and you're going to be really susceptible to just giving up on the things that matter most to you. So rest is so important, has those implications. So, okay, y'all still with me? I feel like I need an icebreaker or something. That's really negative, but all of that I hope resonates a little bit. That we're talking about that rest has huge implications on how you feel, and structurally huge implications for how you've structured your life. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, but I want to talk about the spiritual implications, because that's really what I want to do tonight. Kelsey, when should I end? I didn't start a timer. I just want to keep an eye on that. Well, I know I'm chilling. I don't feel like I'm behind. I just want, as I keep going, to know, when are you and I doing Q&A? Soon. I got a while. Great. Okay. Okay, thank you. It's way sooner than I thought you were going to say. So does Jesus have anything to say to this? Are there spiritual implications for our rest? I want to park there for a little bit. I always like to remind people, like, what is Jesus after in our lives? What is he going after? I like asking that question because, to be honest, the answer ends up very, very different among people who have just had really different spiritual experiences. But what is he after? What's he going after in your life? He's trying to plant, grow in the soil of your life, love, joy, and peace. Old Testament, New Testament, that's what Jesus is after in your life. He's trying to make you a person who's a person of the Spirit, and that includes having the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, and peace in your life. That's what he wants. And because of that, he wants rest for us. I love, and we read that scripture to start. I love that scripture, asking, first of all, are you tired? Are you worn out? Are you burned out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover rest. There's an invitation by Jesus in the Matthew 11 here to rest, saying, even promising, I will give you rest. And I wonder if you've experienced that as true. Are you tired? I like that question. Tim Keller will say that's totally rhetorical, right? Of course you're tired. Of course you've experienced exhaustion. So I feel like everything up until this point, just in this message, is just so easy to agree with. People are like, are you tired? Do you feel too busy? Yes. Is that a terrible experience? Yes. Do you feel the anxiety? Yes. And even this, like, do you really believe that God wants the best for you? People say yes. So I feel like the question then becomes, what spiritual rhythm? It's the how. What spiritual rhythm exists that actually gives rest? What regular rhythm exists in your life in which you practice and defend rest and beauty and worship? What practice exists weekly to get you out of this default, automatic drift into work, email, busyness, and distraction? Most of us love the idea, we just lack a practice. And that's why I really love talking about Sabbath. Because Sabbath, which is seen as often really extra, really niche, I see as a crucial, critical spiritual discipline, and makes or breaks this topic for people. Do you have a spiritual rhythm of rest? The word for that is Sabbath. And so I love filling this in because even though it's new, I find it hugely empowering. I also thought that this was absolutely silly when I first started studying Sabbath. I thought, oh, that's for the Old Testament. That's super old. That's a religious relic. And now it's this essential piece of my life that now is a part of my weekly rhythm. So I just want to talk about Sabbath and what it does. The word Sabbath means, well, it can mean a lot, but essentially it boils down to these four meanings in Scripture. To stop, to cease, it's Shabbat, or be done, to rest, to delight, and to worship. So that's kind of what I want to look at. And if any of you have done or been a part of practicing the way, you've probably experienced this before, because John Mark Comer and his group did such a good job just even laying this out. The question is this: what would it look like for you to set aside a period of time where these four things were true? Where you actually stopped, where you had a real sense of rest, where you delighted, and that led to worship. And so I just want to fill in those categories. The first two are really about what we don't do, and the second two are about what we do. My kids would love that. What we do. So here's my first question, okay? Real question for you guys. When did you stop this past week? Do you have set aside time or moments in which you actually stopped stress, stopped laboring, stopped working? Do Do you actually stop? Where is that in your life? Does it even exist? Are there any moments that that's true? We see first of all that God did this. There's this sense in which when you read the scriptures, even God rested is a huge spiritual reality. That God rested on the seventh day from all his work and all that he had done. God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy, for on it he rested from all his work in creation. That's in Genesis 2. And we just watch our Creator even take time to stop and rest. He worked for 6 days, and then he rested for one. I believe the scriptures show that that's a real rhythm for life, that's actually him showing us the nature of even what it is to live, to be in a rhythm of working and then resting, working and resting. And we'll see Jesus do the same thing. And that's true for you too, that you're not a machine, that you are not your work, that you are a soul, that you are not created to move 24/7. And when we don't do this, it doesn't go well for us. H.H. Farmer said, if you go against the grain of the universe, you will get splinters. There was a recent major study. The opposite is also true. There's a recent major study of Seventh-day Adventists who, and those are Christians who religiously practice the Sabbath. Like it's built into their absolute rhythm of life. And the study found that they were not only happier than us, but they lived on average 11 years longer than the average American, which ironically is about 1/7 longer. So one person postulated for every day they took a Sabbath, they actually got it back at the end of their life, which the math was actually panned out on that. That's a really good sell, right? I'm not going to make a stronger sell tonight on Sabbath than you will live longer. It's probably a false promise, but it's not a foolproof promise. But absolutely, that somehow they were getting that back on the other side. It's in the rhythm of creation. It's something you were made for. This is why later God will actually command it. He'll command the Sabbath to his people and say, remember the Sabbath day, keeping it holy. You're to labor for 6 days and do all your work, but on the seventh day, it's a Sabbath. You must not do any work, you, your son, your daughter, your male or female servant, or any resident alien that's with you. It's not just one of the 10 commandments, it's the longest. Like if you look at the 10 commandments and you look at what they talk about, 37% of the commandments talk about this, the Sabbath, their commandments, which means it's just as important as not stealing, not killing, and all these. It's a part of even your loving the Lord God with all your heart, soul, and mind. It's something that's there. Now there has been there is debate on both sides of the fence here among Christians about, is this binding for us today? Is it actually a commandment that I have to do? But Jesus frames it really well when he says he'll say about the Sabbath that the Sabbath was made for man, not the man for Sabbath. And in that passage, what he's saying is it's a gift. It wasn't meant to be a religious requirement. It was meant to be something that blessed us. So when we think about this, so many people when they hear Sabbath, they think religious requirement. And I did too. Honestly, when I first was like, you're going to turn my day off into like a religious to-do list, that sounds terrible. Just even now, that sounds terrible. I would not engage in that sort of practice. But that's not what Sabbath is. It's meant to be rest for you. It's meant to be something that is life-giving and gives back. It's meant to be a gift. What does stopping look like? So I do this. We get to Friday night and we stop. We do a Shabbat dinner, which is something that we crafted over time. But it's really meant to be this like mark of now we're starting. Now we're starting to rest. So we turn off our phones. We turn off our laptops, which is huge. That's even a funny one. Like if you want to taste Sabbath, if you want to try this first step of stopping, have you ever turned your phone off for a period of time? I guarantee the answer is no for like most people in this room. Try it. Sabbath doesn't even have to be a full 24 hours. It couldn't be for us in some seasons. But if you even do it for 6 hours and you have an intentional discipline to stop and unplug and not do the work, not do the all the time movement that you've constantly been doing. Just see what it gives you. See what it's like. Because the experience of the moment that those go off is already different. Even the relational experience is so different. When I'm at the table with my family and it's like, oh, like work's over there, work's off. So we stop, we have a special meal, we talk to each other, we have some rhythms that we built in. We also make it really special, which I'll talk about. But essentially the whole idea first is like, whatever we do next, I don't want it to look like the other 6 days. Now, what that looks like, that's like a creative thing between you and God, which I think is really fun, because all of these categories, it's really for you. What does it look like for you to stop? When does it even make sense for you to stop? So that's kind of the reflection question I have. If you were to practice Sabbath, you'd have to figure out, what do you need to put aside to have a day that stops the madness, stops the grind, stops the regular loaded, stressed, busy demands of life that we're constantly in. And being busy isn't bad, by the way. Jesus, by all means, was busy. When your life is full of meaningful, worthwhile things, you will have a busy life. But do you have rest alongside that busyness? I think is the place we fumble the most. We have great things. I have a busy life. I read my bio, right? It's busy, but oh my goodness, it also has rest. So that's stop. The second word for Sabbath is rest. And I love this one because this is a personal question. When I ask you, what is restful for you? Can I just ask, like, in this room, because this is always so different, what is something that gives you a deep sense of rest? This doesn't have to be spiritual. Please don't make these all spiritual. Being outside, thank you. What did you say? Guys, grocery games? Is that what I heard? It's individual. You get to make it your own. That's yours. I want more. A bath. Thank you. Okay, yes. I can't stand baths. Some people love baths. That's great for you. What was that? Painting. Wonderful. Running. Thank you. Gardening. Wow, okay. Sleeping. Yes. Yes. That's one of mine. Thank you. Reading fiction. It's great. I guarantee there's things we're going to say out loud right now that other people are like, that sounds terrible. And I think that that's like the beauty of rest. There truly is the sense in which God has created you uniquely to experience him in different ways. I brought a book up here because I really like it, which is Sacred Pathways. And if you haven't read it, it's so wonderful because if you've ever been a Christian who's had spiritual rhythms put towards you, it's like, this should give you rest, and you do not experience rest, which has happened to me, you immediately feel shame. Like, I don't get it, or I'm not Christian enough, or that hour-long scripture meditation didn't deliver, and it's because I'm not good at, like, there's a lot of ways in which I think we have heard the ways others have encountered God and experienced his goodness and beauty and rest, but it didn't fit us. And it might depend on which tradition you're in. If you're in an Anglican tradition, you're going to have a really different experience of liturgy, of senses, of incense, of reading words, of even community. Your experience of God in the way that it's practiced is so different, right? And you guys are at Reach, so it's like, yeah, Reach has its own blend, its own flavor of what it is to connect with God. And that book is about how really that's people. People are so different. The way you experience God and goodness and beauty and rest, so different than the next person. And that's actually by design. That's part of being a different part of the body. So I love that book because it essentially tries to amplify that. It doesn't try to get you to go, well, you need to get the highlighter. Some of you would love that. Some of you highlight like crazy, and your Bible is like, there's more of your writing in your Bible than the actual writing, right? Like some of you like are so good at that, and that's a worshipful thing for you. Others, that doesn't track at all in the moments that you experience God the most. So I really think that that's a by design thing. And that's what we're talking about. It's like, yeah, how has God made you to experience him and the rest, the beauty of life that's in front of you? So I love that. Very different. How will you rest? What would be restful for you is a really fun thing to explore. So I try to do those things on that Saturday for me. Some of them overlap with my family and my wife, and some of them do not, for this exact reason. But I am trying to do those on that day. That's an intentional thing where I'm like, I know what's restful for my soul. I've explored that. Now I'm actually going to try to do it because I know I'll come out of Saturday feeling so much more. And then the third one, the third is delight. Delight's a really fun one. I think I discovered play much later in life. This often happens to us. We have so much fun as kids. Some of you are like so good at play. What a vibe walking in here tonight. It's like, wow, this is a fun group. I guarantee that like if there's a 50s and 60s group, there's a lot less play involved because the older you get, the more play tends to be subtracted. But I think that it's essential. It's actually delight. It's that which you experience as amazing and beautiful. It's enjoyment. And so this one's just wonderful because the only question I have to ask you is like, what do you enjoy? Wonderful. Go do that thing. And for me, I even had a period of time as an adult that I just grinded really hard. And the cost was high. Everything we talked about was like, I got to a point existentially where I was like, why am I alive? Because I feel so burdened. I feel so weighed down, and I'm not even enjoying it. Why am I doing this? Uh, and thankfully, at that time, I was seeing a therapist who's also a Christian, a spiritual director, and he was like, it doesn't seem like you play at all in your life. And I was like, no, am I supposed to play? And started to explore this with me. And then I had a total overcorrection, right? And in 2023, I went to like every concert possible in the Seattle area. Like truly, I was like, oh my goodness, how much money did I spend on concerts that year? Looking at the list, literally looks like something was wrong. Like this guy can't be a dad if he went to all those shows. But I was overcorrecting, and to be honest, I was just having such a good time. Like my nervous system was like, oh yeah, playing. This is fun. And so, but there's this truth of, even in those moments, I was experiencing so much worship. I was experiencing so much of like, oh, look what God has made. Look how beautiful music is. Look how wonderful his world is. And so a lot of our rest is going to include, has to include enjoyment, which sometimes needs to be rekindled if you've been grinding. And will be different for every one of you. So I love that. Like even with my family, when we asked this question, it was just, we have a whole notebook that we were like, what would be fun? You know, what would be fun to do together? What would you love to do? Some of them are so unrealistic, right? My kids are like, go to Disneyland tomorrow, you know. Not possible, right? But we will just go through that and do some of those things. So delight is a huge part of rest. If you're not feeling rested, it's often true that you're missing out on even just play, even just enjoyment in life. So delight, yeah, there's a lot there. But the scriptures even talk about joy not just as a feeling, right, which it is in the scriptures, or a condition. It's actually a discipline. Joy is something you have to choose, which means you have to choose to do the things that give joy, which is a part of Sabbath. So that's what we also do on Saturdays. And then lastly is worship. And honestly, some of this is just axiomatic. If you do those things, if you're stopping your life, if you're doing the things that are restful and life-giving, and if you're delighting, kind of at the end of that time, it really results in a lot of worship. Like I come into Sundays a lot of mornings feeling like, oh, now I'm ready to worship, because for you, you're gonna have to decide what that time is, how big that time is. For me, it's Saturdays. A lot of Christians, it's Sundays. Sunday is their Sabbath. But it's often axiomatic. If you do those things, it often results in real worship. And at the end of the day, we're on a walk, and I'm like, wow, this day's been so incredible. I'm so thankful to Jesus for this world, for his people in my life. And so worship isn't necessarily meant to be, and it can be. I'm often asking, like, yeah, and how can this be worshipful? And I'm trying to help my kids remember, right, Jesus on the Sabbath. But we're not like sitting down and doing long Bible studies, because that wouldn't work with my kids anyway. But honestly, if I'm going to worship, it can't come out of a sense of obligation. It won't be restful. It will only be burdensome. So if you have rhythms of connecting with God that you have engaged in over and over and over again out of a sense of obligation, you will not feel rest. You will only feel overburdened, not getting it, shame because it's not connecting. And that might actually be why it feels that way. So I mean, a lot of Christians, that's the case. So those are the movements of Sabbath. Sabbath is meant to be an intentional time that you set aside where this is the focus, but how you fill those categories is really up to you. And that rhythm, I'll just tell you, I can run really hard in a week. Like this week will be nuts. I shouldn't be up here talking about rest this week. We had a whole conversation at staff meeting where I was like, I shouldn't go talk to these people about rest. This week I made a mistake. I really made a mistake with my schedule. But also I'm kind of like, I've communicated with my family, and it'll be a sprint, and I'll get to Saturday, and it'll be fine, because I will roll into Sabbath again, and I will rest again. If I were to do this week, 2 weeks in a row, yeah, I'd be like a corpse. I'd be on Burnout Central. I would be really unpleasant. But Sabbath it's the cap. It's the limiter. It's the thing that acknowledges limitation and recenters me. So if you never tried it, setting aside that, starting small too, but setting aside that, I want to tell you, it will give so much back. That's the rhythm of rest that I believe Jesus showed us, that God gave us, which can lead to deep soul rest. So that's That's it. You have permission to do that, and to do that intentionally, or to even try that on. So I think Kelsey's going to come up. I think we're going to do some Q&A next. Yeah. Okay. Hey, thanks, guys. Thanks so much. Yeah.
Up to Josh. That was awesome. Alrighty, so on the screen you will see slido.com with a code. Feel free to pull out your phone and enter in some questions. I know all of us have burning questions. What's nice on this app is that if you click the little thumbs up emoji, you can populate to the top the questions that are more burning. And so I'm gonna come on up and I'm gonna allow you to interact with the app in the meantime. Alrighty, you ready for rapid fire
Is it that
Q&A?
fast? Does it happen that fast?
Oh yeah, it's rapid fire.
Oh, okay, great.
It's happening. Okay, so, but we're gonna be restful about it. We're not gonna rush. We're not gonna hurry. We just learned about that. So it's like rapid, but chill rapid, right? Okay, so Josh, super thankful that you are here talking on rest. I need this. Also too, hi, I'm Kelsey. If I haven't met you, I'm the young adults pastor here at Reach. So glad you're here. Okay, let's jump into it. Now we're rapid. First question is, what are ways I can combat phone addiction? I realize I rest while being on my phone, but it's not actually restful.
Have you considered a Wise phone? Battle phone addiction. Oh man. I mean, yes. And the funny thing is we're laughing about the device. There are a lot of dumb phones out there. And so I feel like that's actually a new movement that's happening, and it's exactly in the direction we're talking about, which is how can I limit? And that's what we're talking about, is like how can you know your limits, and how can you, for the sake of your soul, like limit yourself. And for me, I have to have hard stops. And there's ways to do this. I've heard of people who are like, oh yeah, like you can buy the phone that turns off at a certain time. You can even like limit apps. You can set your own parental controls for yourself, which I think is hilarious. You're parenting yourself, which is actually a counseling term. I'm like, yeah, you're parenting yourself. Relationally, my family is now in a rhythm where they just won't let me do it, to be honest. So if the people around you know that you're working towards this too, I think there's a good invitation to be like, hey, I don't, if you are around people at a specific moment, time, gathering, and you're like, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. If you see that, will you nudge me? But it is hard. I just want to acknowledge, like, yeah, like I wasn't kidding when I said, like, I think we're all certifiably addicted in that the dopamine hits are real, and the amount of times people touch their phone every day. Like, recent study was more than 2,000 for the average person, right? Gen Z was twice that. It was incredible. Or you know what it was? It was 2,000, then millennial was twice that, then Gen Z was 3 times that. So it was like almost like this amazing arc that was like, it's getting worse. So we touch it a lot. We're drawn to it. That's a tough one, and that's one that I constantly am battling.
Yeah. Something I'll add to that, a few things. One is really, really practically. Phones have really bright colors on them. And so there's a way, I don't know if this is a shortcut. I know for me it's 3 clicks on the side, but you can actually turn your phone black and white instead of colorful. My husband and my brother-in-law do this, and even just like that act of making it black and white makes it less addicting. So that's one really practical way. Another is, I know for my husband and I, again, we are addicted to our phones. So we are right there. And we have, it's basically like a passcode system. Like it's past 9 p.m. It like logs me out of being able to access social media. And so I have to give it to my husband and he'll type a code to be able to unlock me out of it, or else I can't. It's not just like 15 minutes. It's like, you're out. So setting up that with like roommates could be helpful. There's another app, or it's an organization called Brick, if anybody's heard of it. It's, we have it on our fridge, and basically you just like tap it and it locks you out of everything, and you have to physically tap it to get back in. So if you're disciplined, I'm not, so I wouldn't do that. But I need someone to actually lock me out of my phone without a passcode that I know. So that's me. But I also think that there's something to like phone addiction, saying that you have an addiction, right? It's like the first way to overcome that is but to admit it. I know for me, it took me a really long time to be like, I actually think I have a phone addiction. And once you admit that, I think that there's something powerful that happens with the confession of that, of like your spirit comes into alignment with like, okay, now I'm ready to actually combat it versus just kind of letting this thing dominate you over and over. So I don't know if you can even talk about, addiction and that kind of thing.
I'll just say that book. I mean, that book by John Mark Comer is so great. I think the most helpful recommendation he had is at the end. He has a list of recommendations. His first one is go to the notifications section of your phone and turn off every notification. And that's something that has stuck with me, and it stops the interruption, right? That those notifications are exploiting a psychological vulnerability, right? To look and go and chase that notification. And so like that's it for me. And I used to have all those, the ESPN ones. I'd have the notifications that every time like a team scored a touchdown, I would get a notification. I didn't realize how much it was interrupting my every moment, and now I won't have any of it. So.
Especially if you have an Apple Watch. I know those are kind of out right now, but I mean, for me, it's like I could get notifications all the time and just not be present. So even turning off notifications on even just your watch, like think about small steps. Because I think too, sometimes we can feel so overwhelmed with like, how am I able to tackle all of this? And it's like, just start with one step. That's why I love what you were talking about with Sabbath. You could take that whole 24 hours, bless if you can, but just start with 6 and see how that goes and try a little bit more over time. Okay, so our next question is, I feel lazy when spending too much time resting. How much rest is too much?
Yeah, that makes me really curious about what you're doing, because I think maybe you need to expand, like we talked about, expand the category of rest for yourself, right? There are people who like, when they think about like a spa day, they're like, that literally sounds like hell. Like I'm gonna sit there in silence, it's just when you think about if your idea in your head of resting is I'm doing nothing, to me that doesn't sound good either. I mean, that's not how my brain works. That's not what I want to be doing. That doesn't leave me feeling rested. Some people feel very anxious doing nothing. And so for you, it's like, but for you, leaves you, same thing. What is it? What makes you feel rested? What makes you feel alive? It's not what makes you feel inactive. Like, that's not the question. A lot of rest is active, right? You're doing something that is life-giving. It gives you a sense of wonder, of connectivity to others, of beauty, of worship. And I think the word rest really is that wide, that it can mean so many things. So what does it mean for you? It probably needs to be expanded.
Yeah, something that just came to mind as you were talking was even just like that litmus test of like, am I resting or am I rotting? And you'll be able to know the difference between that. I have in my phone, it's like on the Sabbath day. Sometimes I forget. I'm like, oh, Sabbath. Yes, I should do that. And then I kind of go to this thing that I created that's in the description that has all these questions. And for me, this is a really helpful like litmus test to be like, is this resting or is this rotting? But it's like if the focus is gratitude for what God has blessed us with, is this rest? Is this worship? Is it filling my soul with beauty? Whatever makes me break out in spontaneous worship to God, that is Sabbath. Enjoyment is an act of rest. And I just feel like if I am doing something and I'm breaking out into spontaneous worship, I'm like, thank you, God, for this. Like I'm going on a walk, I'm looking at nature, I'm like, wow, thank you, God. Or I'm cooking in my kitchen to jazz music, and I'm like, this is so restful. Like something that like allows your spirit to catch up and be like, wow, I'm so present to this moment. I'm so grateful. That is rest. Scrolling on my phone, doom scrolling often, rotting. So that's that.
Yeah, I'm thinking of someone who has ADHD. It's like, oh, your brain is wired for more activity. And if the answer for that person is like, stop doing stuff, do nothing, just how unfair that is.
Yeah.
And it really is that people's brains makeup, like bodily makeup, is totally different. And so the answer to what is rest is going to be totally different for them.
Next question is, how do you balance rest and the desire to be productive at this age where productivity is so crucial?
Yeah, I think the rhythm, and that's what's really interesting, is if you rest well, it actually leads to higher productivity. That's what's crazy about even like work stats. Like, we were talking in the back before this, and someone was saying, why haven't we gotten to the 4-day work week yet? And I was like, preach, But I also was thinking, what the research actually shows that the productivity levels are the same for people who work 40 hours a week or 50 hours a week or 60. These studies keep getting replicated over and over again. The productivity level is the same because when people get exhausted, they don't even work well. So what I'm trying to say is, like, you have to rest well to even work well, right? And there's lists out there of basically the best ideas that have ever happened, like spontaneous ideas. They all happen, and there's like, not they've all happened. So many of them have happened in moments when someone was actually not even working, right, at all, right? They were resting, because creativity, especially in your frontal cortex, when you rest, you get the freedom to create. Your brain actually gets less rigid. So I would just say, yeah, like, truthfully, if you rest well, it should lead to even better work, because you're fulfilled, because you've slept, so I think, yeah. But what that number is, again, totally different for each person. And I'm a therapist. The guy that trained me to be a therapist, he sees 40 people a week, which is insane. Oh, no. All right, most therapists see 20 to 25 max. I can't do that. I can't see 20 to 25 max. It was a really bitter pill to swallow. And I remember when he told me that, because he told me that offhanded once, like, oh yeah, I see about 40 people a week. And I was like, how do you do that? And he said, I just really look forward to seeing them. And I went, oh, you're made out of something different than me. Okay, great. Like, truly, and every single one of those clients was on a screen. None of them were in person, I was like, oh, you really are made out of something different than me. So even for him, like, his work week is gonna look totally different than mine, because I couldn't do that and not die or hate my life, like, and I love counseling, but yeah, I'm gonna see 10 to 15 a week and still feel exhausted. And so I think people's productivity and their rest it's gonna be different for every person.
Yeah, it's interesting when we think about productivity. I'm reminded in this moment of a sermon that I listened to in California a couple years ago, but the pastor was talking about this idea of rest and productivity. And he was basically alluding to, like, if we work, and then we're waiting to the weekend and we finally rest, we work, and rest. It's like, that is just a grind, right? But he kind of reframed it, and he was like, what if we rest so well that we're working out of a place of rest? And I think that entirely changes the way that we think about rest and productivity. It's if we're resting and Sabbathing so well, we're productive out of that place versus striving and trying to grind and get that done. And it just, like, changes the motivation for how we're actually productive.
I feel like there's another implication, like money's a huge implication. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, even what we're describing, like, I need to further my career. I mean, with your guys' age, I bet a lot of you are like, am I ever going to own a house? I don't know what the answer is for you guys. I'm so sorry. Right? All those memes that are like, boomers are the last ones to live the American dream and stuff, and they're all like dancing, right? All of those are like, wow, that's true. They're the only ones that are going to own homes ever again. What I'm trying to say is, money is this huge implication for you guys, especially at this age, right? That's the burden, to get a career, to move towards things that probably are really meaningful to you, like having a family, like having something that's sustainable, or even having a family. That's really big. Money, I feel like, is a topic that John Mark Comer does not talk about, that I constantly hear from people in counseling, which is, I would really like to rest, but I have to make more money. Or I'm way overspent, or I have huge school debt. And so I think there is huge money implications to our ability to enter rest or not. I have a friend who's a financial advisor, and he manages huge accounts, like people that are making, just millions and millions of dollars. And I made some glib comment at him once, like, yeah, well, those people aren't stressed. And he was like, oh, no, those people are the most stressed. And I was like, tell me about that. Because when I think about making the $200 million a year that you just described that guy makes, I would be chilling. I would be on a golf course in my mind. I'd be on a golf course like 6 days a week, or whatever. And And so I asked him about that, and he said, well, no, you just need to know every person I help manage their finances, every person has expanded their budget beyond what their income is, because it's human nature to do it, and then they're massively stressed just like you. And so he said the main work that he does is managing people's stress who have expanded. So there's this human thing in us where we what happens when we expand beyond our budget? We are super stressed because we're in a terrible financial situation where we have to figure out how to make that money to get out of deficit. So I think that's I think like, can you budget is actually like the sneaky question that's a part of rest, because even that's a limiting question. Have I said no to enough that I don't have to go earn more right now? I can stop. I earned enough this week. But we also have this tendency to overspend, which fuels that. So I think that's something that's really true and has been true of my life too. So yeah.
I'm realizing we could expand forever. I'm like, oh, rapid fire. We got to keep going.
I don't think I realized that. Is it meant to be like really quick?
I mean, it's called rapid fire, but then I was like, it's chill rapid fire. So I didn't really set you up for success there. But how do I combat feelings of guilt or selfishness for taking time to myself for rest?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it just makes me so curious about the story. If you were sitting with me, to be like, yeah, tell me. I again, this is a therapist thing to do. What is it about stopping that feels so wrong? What is it about tending to your own needs, right? That's kind of what I started with, was, do you believe you have needs? Do you believe those needs are valuable? Like, can you name what those needs are? Do you believe they're valuable? Do you believe that they're worthy of being met? Do you meet those needs? How have you met those needs? Has someone ever met those needs for you? So I don't know what the story is there, but I think what was said there is, I feel inadequate or wrong when I meet my need of rest. And so I think there's maybe more there that we could talk about, but I usually am trying to help people see what their needs are, just validate that is a human need, and that it's okay. What would it be like to be okay meeting that? What would it be like to say, even God wants that for me, wants me to be whole? And I think holy and whole are two words. Paul uses that at one point. He says, may you be holy and whole. And I think sometimes we really believe in order to be holy, we cannot be whole. And I think that's even the discussion I'm talking about. Like, you probably have human needs that in that scenario that you're neglecting, that are very real. Yeah, I hope that's sensitive enough to say, and that I would really want to hear more.
We have time for probably two more. But I really like this question because I think it hints at, it will answer a lot for everybody else. But would you consider workout activities, i.e. rock climbing, as something you can do on the Sabbath?
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, traditionally, like, moving in nature is like historically the most consistent practice of Sabbath practicing Jews across the centuries. So walking, hiking, I think that's actually historically, you could make an argument that is the most Sabbath doing activity, the most Sabbath consistent activity historically. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the one thing I will add to that is, like, if you know for yourself, if you are doing an activity that you know it's going to put you in a negative headspace, if you're like, oh man, I'm so bad at rock climbing, or I should be able to do this, it's like, that doesn't feel like enjoyment. That does not feel like life-giving rest. That going to break you out in spontaneous worship, right? And so it's like, yes, the activity of rock climbing usually is, restful, but if it's not for you, even if you're trying to do it and you're hard on yourself through it, that's not going to be restful. So maybe reconsider what an activity that is restful would look like. Okay, actually, I'm going to do two more. Oops, spoiler. Okay, really quick. As a clinician, is there a difference between restlessness versus a diagnosis of ADHD?
Oh yeah, and I don't specialize in ADHD, except that I know there's records of adults who are being diagnosed with it right now, and that's not glib. Like, they're like, you meet the criteria. But yeah, restlessness is such a general word. ADHD is a very real set of symptoms that if you have, you have a different wiring of the brain that seeks stimulation, needs it, has hyperactivity, means has more activity, more brain stimulation seeking activity in the way that you're made. And so yeah, but restlessness, It feels really general. Like I can be restless for a lot of reasons. I can be restless because something happened that I'm holding that I keep thinking about because that actually was painful, and I wish I wouldn't have said X, Y, Z. Like restlessness can be for a number of reasons. ADHD speaks to more like a physical thing that's in you, that is your body and brain makeup. And that can be really empowering. There's wonderful, if you're wondering that, even Emmaus Counseling in Redmond, they do adult assessments for ADHD, which has been super empowering for people who are just neurodivergent. It's kind of hilarious to be in this area because we're next to Microsoft and Amazon and Google and Expedia, and it's like filled with the most neurodivergent people ever. Like tech people are so neurodivergent. The people that are drawn into that field they experience the world differently. They are the neurodivergent people. So many of them are ADHD, and it's just like it's right here, like a big group of them, and so that assessment's super empowering to those people who I guarantee have had experiences where they feel like something's wrong with me, and it's like, oh, nothing's wrong with you. Like the way you work is different, and in those jobs they tend to excel because of that. So.
And something I'll plug too is while Reach also has like care ministries and like that kind of thing, Josh actually owns a counseling practice called New Ground Counseling. And so in our monthly newsletter, we'll definitely list that as the resources. That's just a great step to start in counseling if maybe that's something that you feel like you want to talk through. Okay, last question. I just really want to get practical. Not that this hasn't, but even more so. And while I do this, I'm going to welcome Jordan up, and he's going to transition us into our next thing. But can you share some examples of intentional rest activities that you engage in?
Oh yeah. I mean, some of them were listed. I love to read, but not what you think. Like I don't read like the pastor resources. Like truly, I love to read fiction. I can consume fiction so fast. I can get lost in a story so quickly. I also nerd out on board games hard, which I didn't realize was a whole movement until I went to like a men's retreat a couple years ago, and I was sitting at a table, and for an hour and a half they talked about board games, and I didn't say a word. But I didn't realize how big that world is. And it is. It's like, oh, and they're all talking about these $200 board games that they're buying, and I thought that was madness, and now I'm super into them. So,
are you shamelessly plugging our board game night next Tuesday?
Yeah, that was a plant. Yeah, we practiced that.
Come rest at 20s and 30s game night.
I think I can live that spa life, and I dipped my toe in it this last year. I was in Palm Springs, and there's literally there's like a park. It's like an amusement park. Like if you saw the map, you'd be like, that looks like Disneyland, but it's Glen Ivy, and it's a spa with basically just endless, stuff I would have thought this was terrible, but like different mineral baths and cold pools and plunges and all kinds of stuff. Kendall and I went there because somebody said you had to go there, and we were like, well, this could be weird. And afterwards, I was like, oh, I think I could totally live that spa life. Just like going from heat to cold. I actually love that now. I love the sauna to the cold plunge. Like we do that. I kind of obsessed with it. I have to move my body. That's me. I have to exercise. It actually helps me feel connected to my body. I'm somebody who actually has spent most of my life disconnecting from my body, feeling like my body's bad, going up into ideas, not pushing through moments in my life when I felt unsettled, just pushing through them and deepening that disconnect. So exercise is something that actually like helps me feel really connected to my body, taking care of my body. I feel like there's something at a soul level that feels very good, like something very right is happening, something very in my humanity that was meant to happen. So yeah.
You just reminded me of this thing I heard, which is if you work with your mind, rest with your hands. But if you rest with your hands, work with your mind.
I like that line. Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like you work with your mind and emotions and, like that kind of thing and reading people. And so for you to be able to, go to CrossFit as you do and like that kind of thing, it like makes a lot of sense. But
I dig video games. It's the number one conflict in my home is that I really like complex puzzles and adventure. And I really like that. And now my kids really like it. And my wife is really frustrated about it. So I don't have answers for that one, except that is a real Sabbath activity for me in moderation. So, and it's an active conflict too.
I love it. and I'll just quickly plug mine, but I love going on walks with friends. That's like honestly a huge way. After I'm like, wow, that was so life-giving, or I felt so seen, and it truly like makes me want to break out in spontaneous worship to God. And so I love walking around like Green Lake, or I love walking Edmonds because I live over on that side of the pond. But yeah, that's just really restful for me. I also love cooking and baking, and I love, honestly, just like walking through Trader Joe's. To be honest, I love variety. And I like, honestly, I leave being like, that was so life-giving. I also heard this really funny thing. I don't know if I'm sharing it. Okay, great, here we go. But it's like, I heard, don't take this. Just, I heard this really funny thing about, back in the day when there were hunters and gatherers, and how, we are gatherers when we go to Trader Joe's. I just really identify with that. I'm like, oh, I gathered this new pretzel option that I saw that was really cool. And I honestly praise the Lord after. I'm like, this is awesome.
Spontaneous worship.
Spontaneous worship, truly. I'm like, acts of gratitude, man. I just feel so, I love that. Anyway, that has been all for our rapid fire Q&A. I'm going to welcome up Jordan. Can we give a round of applause for Josh and the words of wisdom? We are transitioning into a time of reflection. We're just going to take just a few minutes. Josh has prepared some really intentional questions for us to reflect on. They're going to be on the screen behind me. And just take some time for yourself to just take inventory. If you want to write these down, you can. If you want to take a picture of them and reflect later, you can. And then after, we'll have some announcements, and then we'll have those discussion questions up on the screen so you can talk with people about them. But yeah. These are going to be the questions right here.
We're going to sing a song, and if you're still in the reflection mode, go ahead and stay there. No pressure to sing along. The first line of this song is, "Are you hurting and broken within?" Which is like, yes, everyone. We all are. It feels a little bit, not emotionally manipulative, but it's very much like we're going in deep. So there's going to be some prayer people on the sides if you need to just get something out. you hurting and broken, thin, overwhelmed by the weight of your sin? Jesus is calling. Have you come to the end of yourself?